Hello, everyone. I am Julia, and today we are going to talk about some GMAT verbal tips. We'll start with some general study tips just to kind of make sure that we've got good study hygiene and we're on the same page, and then I will get into specific verbal tips to help you do your best on the GMAT verbal. So let us get started. And feel free to drop questions in the chat, and I will try to address them as we go or at the end. So real quickly, just some general study tips for the GMAT. Start the study process early. There's a very good chance that you're underestimating how long it will take. It is a very involved process. Remember your why. So studying, it's long, it's challenging. There will be some ups and downs for sure. It's good to remember why you're putting in the work, because that might be the only thing that makes you study some days. Grit leads to success. Being determined, you don't have to be particularly smart or academically gifted if you are determined with your studies. So applying yourself is the best thing that you can do. Develop a growth mindset. It's counterproductive to consider yourself fixed. You can always improve. You're trying to go to grad school, like you will learn things. So just focus on that. Don't identify as someone who isn't good at math or as someone who doesn't have good reading comprehension, but as someone who is working on their reading comprehension skills. Build atomic GMAT habits. So basically, it's better to improve a little bit every day than to set unattainable goals that are discouraging, or even goals that you can't easily track progress. 1% every day compounds very quickly. And of course, everyone's path is unique. Don't compare yourself, especially unfavorably, to people who have a different path than you. People learn at a different level, they learn at a different pace, and everyone's starting at a different level. So you don't know where everyone is starting from. Just be kind to yourself. Let's look at a couple of general verbal sorts of tips. So specific verbal strategies overall. Do not just run through your practice questions. You have a finite number. It's large for sure, but making the most of your practice questions will make sure that you are really able to cement the topics within the amount of verbal questions that you have, and also really drilling down into the questions is where you're able to develop the most valuable skills. Learn before you practice. You want to understand what's going on. So the modules I use TTP self-study, and that's where most of my advice comes from. But the modules, they're not very long, but if you don't learn about the topic that you're testing on, then it's harder to integrate that knowledge and develop the deep understanding that leads to really high scores, really conceptual answers, and beating those harder questions. Start your GMAT verbal practice untimed. Don't limit yourself with the timer early on, because you're not going to be fast enough. That is fine. No one is fast enough. It's something they just started learning. You will get faster, but more so, you don't want to use the timer as an excuse to not figure questions out all the way. You don't want to say to yourself, hey, I have 2 minutes and 2 minutes are up, and so I will just look at the answer explanation. That's not going to allow you to develop the skills that are so important to really high level comprehension. Take the time you need to rule out answers, get down to the last two, and then decide between the last two, because that's going to be the most valuable thing you can get out of your studies. Avoid GMAT verbal gimmicks. People always have these gimmicks, like read just the first sentence of every paragraph of your reading comprehension passage. Don't do that. It's not going to save you any time, and it's going to prevent you from learning the skills that are actually going to help you do well. So any quick hacky tips, just be very skeptical of those. Get comfortable with discomfort. It will not be comfortable all the time. Sometimes you will be very frustrated, and it's good to just understand that that's part of the process, and don't feel like it's part of you. That it's okay to be frustrated when you're learning new things, and it's hard to understand what's going on sometimes. And so it's not a failing on your part. That is literally just the path to growth. Don't be hard on yourself. Just expect that there will be some discomfort along the way. And of course, select appropriate study materials. That is particularly important right now as we are moving into the focus, because a lot of the materials from a couple of years ago are just designed for a slightly different exam. And so be very wary of the materials you're using and the sort of results that you can expect from those, because this exam does cover different things than the previous exam. Let's look at a couple of specific to the question strategies. We'll start with critical reasoning. So read the argument first. Do not read the question first, because it can bias you as far as what you're looking for in the argument. And you're going to have to read the argument anyway, so you're not going to save any time by reading the question first, and it might bias you in a way that hurts your ability to answer. Identify the components, break down your arguments, break them down on pen and paper, or however you want to do your notes. If you want to do the virtual notepad as well, just be sure that you're actually breaking them down. This is such a point of resistance. It was a big point of resistance for me. I did not think that I needed to write things down, and I trusted myself to be able to mentally identify and remember what was going on, and that was misplaced trust on my part. I had such a better time of it once I started writing things down. It's hard to make yourself do what is perceived as like extra or superfluous work, especially when you're planning to be so against the clock. But you have got to make sure that you are accurately identifying the conclusions, the premises, any background info, looking for where assumptions rest. I think it's good to practice, especially early on, kind of guessing some assumptions that the argument may rely on, just so you can make sure that you understand these components, you can identify them in a wide variety of situations, and then write them down so that when you get through the question, you can go back and see how you did. You can compare the answer explanation to your breakdown, and you can also see if you got the question right. Was your breakdown helpful? If you got the question wrong, did you miss a part on your breakdown? Did you get all of the parts and your error was somewhere else? It's so helpful to have that record. Please write things down. And of course, look for reasons to eliminate answers. It's much better to eliminate answers because they are wrong than to try to pick an answer because it's right. If you are eliminating answers because they are wrong, you will be able to eliminate 4 out of 5. Even at the higher levels, it might get harder to eliminate them, but you should always be able to knock out 2 or 3 pretty easily. And then if you're going through and eliminating answers and you end up having to guess because it's the real test and you're out of time or whatever reason, you're guessing from a smaller pool. So go ahead and jot down your answer choice letters and then mark them out as you eliminate them. Also, be careful as you were going through the first time to eliminate things that you are pretty confident are wrong. Don't eliminate things that you are unsure about, because those might be the best answers. Sometimes the best answer isn't particularly strong, but it will be stronger than the next best answer in a clear way. So It's better to eliminate answers that are wrong until you're left with the best one, and only eliminate answers that you are sure are wrong. Don't eliminate answers that you are unsure about. Let's look at some reading comp tips. Read for general comprehension. Critical reasoning, every part matters. They're not very long. Single words can drastically change what you're looking for, what the argument is saying. You have to really focus on each part because of the limited amount of parts. Reading comp, there's a lot more to go through, so you'll have more time to watch patterns emerge, and you won't have time to go through and memorize every detail, but you do not have to do that because the passage will be there for you. So read for general comprehension. Go through, get a good idea of the main idea or primary purpose of the passage, any opinions shared, any people that are name dropped, whether the author agrees or disagrees with what they're saying, and of course the layout. Understand the layout. Passages tend to fall into a finite number of layouts, and so as you read more and more, you will notice that they kind of follow some patterns. There's not that many, and they will also always have a very clear layout. So it'll be, introduce a myth, give some evidence as to why the myth is not true, author states a conclusion, or introduce a technology, author states some good things about the technology, author states some drawbacks of the technology, author states a conclusion. They will follow very clear patterns. You will be able to see the patterns. If you aren't there yet, I would not worry too much because as you practice, it will get easier, but make sure that you are reading for general comprehension and try to get to the point where as you read things the first time through, you are able to build your simple story. So the sentence that encapsulates the overall idea of the passage, and you are noticing structural markers, any opinions, anything like that. So that by the time you get done with your first read through, you've got a decent idea of what's going on. You don't have to memorize everything, but you do not have infinite time to read things. So you want your reading comp to be at a level to where the first read through, you can get the high points of what's happening. And refer back to the passage. Your memory is not reliable. You will have a lot going on. Many reading comp questions can be answered by referring back to the passage. So when you read through the passage, you're looking for the answer to primary purpose because it might not be stated in a sentence. Since it covers the overall idea of the passage, it's hard to just skim through and pick that up. Same thing for structure. It can be kind of tricky to skim through and pick that up. But anything else, why did the author mention X? Why is X highlighted? What is the point of this quote? Anything like that, refer back to the passage and reread the sentences that are surrounding what is being asked about, because you don't want to make a careless error because you thought you remembered what was happening and you didn't. There's a reason that the passage is there. Don't be afraid to use the tools that are available to you, and you will be able to do much better. Let's see. We're going to talk about a couple of other topics or a couple of other general verbal tips in the context of both types of questions. So let's look at them. Everything you need to know will be provided by the question. This is so important to remember. In critical reasoning, they will provide you everything you need to know. You don't have to have any background information, or you don't have to have any background experience with the topic. You don't have to understand anything specific or special. The only thing you need to do is to grasp the logical flow of the argument and be able to parse it out of what's given, and then be sure that you are answering the questions asked. Because on an assumption question, there's almost certainly going to be a trap answer that weakens the argument. On a strengthened question, same deal. And on weakened questions, they will have strengthening options. So if you understand the logical flow of the argument and you understand what is being asked, you will be okay. Same thing with reading comp. No matter how abstract the question, the answer is available there. They are testing your ability to reason through things, so you might have to reason through some things, but everything that you need will be provided by the question. And if you don't see that, if you don't see what the question is looking for, then go back and read it again. And that is another reason why it's so important to practice untimed when you're first learning, because you will be slower and you don't want to let yourself off the hook. Looking for these things, finding these logical flows, finding these specific parts of passages that you need to answer the question, because finding that information quickly is a very important part of doing well on the verbal section. Let's see. Don't pre-think your answers in a way that restricts you. People will sometimes get into the habit of, oh, I think the obvious assumption is this, and then that won't be available in the answer choices, or it won't be phrased exactly the same way, even if it's a very similar idea. So you don't want to pre-think in a way that limits you. I do think you want to engage with the material, though. The more interested you are in what's in front of you, the more you will be able to get out of it. You want to be able to read these critical reasoning arguments and, feel impassioned to poke holes in them and question the author's logic and tear things apart. With engagement, that's a lot more fun. And same thing with reading comprehension. If you are reading and engaging with the material and excited about it, read things like they were written by your friends and you want to give them a good review, right? And so that's how you are able to do well, is by engaging. And I don't want you to feel like engaging with things is the same as pre-thinking, because engaging with things is so important to success. It's also important to just getting more out of the experience of studying. And I think that can be really encouraging. Just don't limit yourself with rigid beliefs, but do please get excited about the material. There is a lot to learn. Let's see. Language is important, but logic is king. The GMAT uses words strategically in a lot of cases, and they use words very, very literally, very specifically in a definitive way. And so understanding the scales of things instead of taking them colloquially, for instance, like the word sum can mean 1 or 10% or 100%, whereas we might not use that typically in everyday conversation in the same way. You have to understand the exact definitions of words so that you don't make mistakes on the difference between better and best or worse and worst. But the main thing is to follow the logical flow. So please pay attention to the words used, but if you are developing good logical skills, that is what these questions are testing for, and that will really reward you. So that needs to be your focus, because that is that's the skill that you want in business school, and reasoning will carry you very far. It's a test of reasoning most of all. But also, please pay careful attention to the words used, because they will be used in an exact fashion, and that is very important to learn so that you don't make mistakes as far as assuming things are colloquial when they are not. That's the other important part of preparing for the exam. A lot of people like to go in cold, and then they get a very low mock score, and they're thinking, oh, I couldn't possibly improve like 200 or 300 points. But honestly, if you take your first mock and you didn't look over anything before you started, or you didn't understand how the test was structured, then it can be artificially low because there is some tricks to this, and I think that getting a good feel for the test is quite a point changer. So don't be discouraged by an early mock, because what you are learning about before you take the test for real is both the topics that it covers and sort of the structure and the layout, the purpose of the questions, that sort of thing as well. And so that would be something to consider if you did get a low mock, for sure. And let's see. Let me go over here. Pass on the Cliff Notes versions of GMAT Prep. You want to learn this material correctly. There's a couple of reasons that passing on the Cliff Notes versions are important. One, there's not that much material. A lot of your time will be spent practicing and doing questions and the like. And so you want to learn the material that's there because it's a finite amount, but you also want to kind of dive into it because high level coverage of the material is not necessarily going to hit the points that are most helpful in general. It might also not hit the points that resonate with you in specific. I think that that's often overlooked. You want to see why things are important in a way that resonates with you so that you can apply the material later. And learning the material in kind of a comprehensive way is really helpful to give you more opportunities to find the material that resonates with you. If you try to high level overview things, it can take some of that opportunity away from you. So when I first started studying, I studied with just the OG material on the website, mba.com. So I would read the little blurbs about each topic, and then I would take some practice questions. And the blurbs did not reflect in a way that helped me with the practice questions because they were just so high level. They were so much a summary of the topic that if you needed any in-depth information, it wasn't covering that. It was very much like practice problem focused. That's why I ended up switching to TTP, because I was able to read through them. I mean, I read through most of the lessons in like a couple of weeks, but then I wasn't seeing any results on my practice questions, and it clearly wasn't working. I needed more information. Like I needed more specific instruction. I needed more detail to connect the topic with the questions over the topic. And once I switched to getting a more in-depth review of the topics, I was able to do a lot better on practice questions. So don't try to speed through the lessons, because again, that's not where you're going to spend most of your time anyway. It's really not that much material. Cutting time down there is just going to hold you back in the long run, and it's not going to get you very much benefit. You'll have plenty of time for practice questions later. And you also want to understand why are we doing these questions? Like, why do they include passages like this over these topics, structured in this way? What are they hoping to assess? What can I get out of it? That is what good study material can do for you. It can show you why things are important. It's the difference between just forcing yourself to get through the GMAT prep so you can take the GMAT so you can move on with your life and getting something out of it. And to me, you're better off spending more time and getting something out of it than you are not spending as much time, but you were just miserable throughout the whole experience and you didn't get to learn why things were important and learn why they mattered and learn how they will help you later. So you're better off studying in depth 100% and getting the most out of the material and seeing why it's important. So that was a lot of my topics. Let me see. This is some testimonials from TTP, which again, I used. I really enjoyed the program. It's very in-depth, but it's also super organized, and that helped me a lot because after going through the OG material, I wasn't very confident about how much I needed to learn to do well. And so one of the things that TTP did for me is it allowed me to study things in such a comprehensive way that it helped me with some of my anxiety about, oh, there's no way that I'm going to be able to design a study plan that has everything I need. So it was so helpful for that. A lot of people, I think, have that experience. And it is customizable to a certain degree because I went in, I did not have a mock score. I saved all my mocks for the end. And I did everything from scratch. And I got the most comprehensive version of the self-study plan. And by the time I was through with it, I felt like if there was something that I missed, then basically it did not matter. Like I had learned all I could possibly learn and I had no room to retain any more information. And it turned out that, first time I got a perfect score. So I feel pretty good about how comprehensive it was. But if you are like me and you are happy to do things in a structured way, but structuring things is awful and you do not want to do it, then having a structured study guide that covers everything, super great, super helpful, saves a lot of time and energy. And I think that has been the experience of many people. Here are some more. Structured and methodical approach to learning. Yeah, I think that is really the best thing about paying for a study plan is that someone who knows what all is included is doing it for you, and they are probably better at it than you are. And then there is some more. And we are doing on demand for GMAT. So we're kind of rolling this out. I've been working on it a little bit, but it will mostly be the professional instructors. So basically, it's like a class that they talk through the lessons, but you just do it when you have time. So you get all the benefit of experts kind of going through the lessons. If you like to have things explained and if you like to see people elaborating on topics, I think it's very, very helpful. So you get the benefits of the expertise, but also if you're like me, one of the reasons that I didn't do the instructor-led is that I kind of have to study when I have time, or especially if you were in a time zone that isn't as easy to match up with people in the US or similar time zones and get instructor-led training, then I think that it's very helpful to have something like this. This was not available when I studied, but we are working on it and we are trying to do our best at all times. So hopefully this will really resonate with people. I think that it will be great. And we do have this guarantee of point increases. So that is definitely something to consider. If you have taken the test and you have not been happy in the past, then I do think that the Target Test Prep course can really help you out. And we also have a free trial. So that is how I found out about Target Test Prep, and it worked out well for me. I believe that we do have a sale going on, 25% off. heads up on that. And that is most of my topics. So if you have questions, I am happy to address. Just FYI, those are the coupon codes. How to manage time on the verbal section, please. It's hard to stick to the average of 2 minutes per question. Yes, it is. Let me see how I want to structure. So the more you practice, the better your time will get. But here is the caveat. Sometimes you have to slow down to speed things up. If you were regularly having a hard time with the timing, then it could be because you're a little bit early and you haven't practiced enough to get to the level where you can do questions in 2 minutes, in which case the only solution is to keep practicing. If you have been practicing a while and you feel like you should be able to do it more quickly, then there are other considerations. And this is one of the things that I would say it might be time to take notes, because yes, it is slower and you will be able to do less practice questions, but taking the notes is where you see where the problems are. And I think that that's the biggest thing about errors and also speeding up. You have to be able to see where the errors are happening. Are you messing up on breaking down the argument? Are you having a hard time finding conclusions? Are you not understanding the assumptions? Or are you missing things in the question stem and answering the wrong questions? So go through and do a breakdown of every question. I know that it takes extra time, but you just have to do it so you can make sure that you are doing everything correctly. You will not have to do your written breakdowns forever and ever, but you have got to make sure that you're able to do it correctly untimed, because if you can't be accurate with no time limit, it's very hard to be accurate with a time limit. Now, that is more of an early on, not like a week before the exam tip, because I see you also had a question about how to know when to cut losses on a question in terms of time. This is easier on quant than verbal because you can kind of see on quant how far you've got to go. I think on verbal, you can really spend any amount of time on a question. You can think about it any amount. So if you are trying to guess how to cut time, I would say if you're 60 seconds in and you're just not sure if you're going to be able to figure it out, see what you've ruled out. Like I said, you should be able to rule out 2 or 3 answers fairly easily on any question, and then guess from there and bookmark it and come back, because you don't want to spend a bunch of time on a question that you're just not going to do well on, or that there's a decent chance you won't do well on, and then not give yourself time later on for questions that you have a better shot with. So at about 60 seconds, I would check in and see how you're feeling. See if things are becoming more clear or if this one just isn't going to work for you. And sometimes you'll come back to it later, and just coming at it from a different angle is helpful, because sometimes, you felt weird about the last question and now you're on this question and you don't realize it, but it's carrying over. But then you bookmark it and you come back at the end coming from a different question, and it's like seeing it with fresh eyes, and you can more clearly see what's going on, and your mind is it's at a different point. So 60 seconds is a good rule of thumb to be like, hey, how am I doing on this? Am I going to be able to finish it or not? Let's see here. Sometimes it's hard to understand what authors try to say. Any tips? So that is a really practicey solution. That the solution is practice. One thing that I did that helped me is that I would do the practice problems, but I also started, after a couple of months of prepping, I started just reading like articles in the New York Times for me because they had a special. And so I would just read 1 or 2 a day, about 15 to 30-ish minutes a day. And I would go through and kind of break down the articles. And that helped me see a bunch of different voices of writing and also a bunch of different topics in a way that made my mind more adaptable as far as like, this is how people communicate. Some people will be more clear than others. Some topics I feel like are more clear than others because we might have some preconceived notions as far as, oh, I don't like to talk about physics or whatever the case may be. And so whenever the topic is on physics, then your brain might just kind of start to pull back a little bit in a way that is not helpful. So I do recommend just like reading a few different short-ish passages or articles a day and kind of practicing looking at different voices, because if you read The Economist or something like that, you'll probably get quite a bigger variety than you will on GMAT passages because they are so often structured in like a finite amount of ways and also very clearly, and just coming to it from the perspective of, oh, like this person could be talking about anything, their structure could be anything, and then coming back to the GMAT, sometimes that helps you appreciate how much more clearly things are laid out. But also, if you are having a hard time understanding what the author is saying, that is another reason for practicing untimed, because it is a hard skill to develop, to go in and just be mentally switching every 2 minutes to a whole new topic or a whole new argument or a whole new passage, and going back through and spending 10 minutes on a passage, but you're developing an understanding of it, is a benefit of practicing early. And then later you will have the ability developed more clearly and you'll be able to do it more quickly. So yeah, also sometimes they're just not as clear, and that is the bad luck. But if you practice, the more you practice and the more you develop like your logical skills and your reading comp skills, and the more you get through these hard questions that just seem designed to be convoluted, the quicker you will be and the more confident you will be. So try to keep practicing, and that's really, it's not a quick fix, but it is how you get better. Hey, even I'm facing time problem. Like, I'm able to solve most of the questions if I spend 5 to 6 minutes, like in CR questions, but can't make it in 2 minutes. If it's taking you 5 or 6 minutes to solve them, but you're getting it right, then I think that you're doing well. So it kind of depends on your accuracy. If you are taking a while, but you're consistently answering the questions correctly, then that's the harder part, because honestly, anyone can answer a question in 2 minutes if they don't get it right. Any of us could guess. If you were developing the accuracy, if you keep applying yourself, then you will cut your time down. Because there was definitely a time where it took me, 7 or 8 minutes every question. And the only way to get faster is to keep going through, but accuracy is more important than being quick, especially early on. Hi, how did you review the questions you got wrong when you did practice tests in terms of managing your error log and making sure you don't repeat those mistakes for both quant and verbal? So I would look through, there's a couple of things about reviewing incorrect answers. One of them is, what did I do? And one of them is, why did I do it? So if I did something incorrect, and then I went and I looked at the explanation, and I, especially on quant, if I like picked the wrong approach, it's a little bit more clear cut on that, then I would look at the explanation and then take some time, like take a couple days and mark the question and come back so I could see if after reading the explanation, did I do it the way I did it the first time, which was incorrect, or did I do it the correct way? So you can't retake it like right after you read the explanation because it'll be fresh on your mind. But if you give yourself a little bit of time to forget and then you come back, see if you can read the question and it triggers you to do the right approach. In a similar thing, if you are identifying the parts of an argument and you get them wrong, like you get one wrong, you think the conclusion is whatever, but it's actually this other thing, then keep a record of what you thought and then read the explanation, see why you were wrong, set a timer for the question and come back to it in a couple of days and see if you can do better. On your mock exams, one thing that I recommend is giving yourself a lot of time to review them. So I would take one on a Saturday and then I would spend the next week reviewing it. And also look through every question, because just because you got something right doesn't mean you got it right out of skill. You might have gotten it right out of luck. It is a multiple choice test. Some of them are going to be luck. So I would give yourself plenty of time to review questions. And also with the extra time, one thing that you get is that you can look through, see why you did it wrong, and then put it aside, like leave yourself a note, put it aside for a couple of days, and then come back to it and see if you do it the right way or if you do it the way that you initially did it, and then kind of rinse and repeat. Or if you're still doing it the old way, put it aside for longer. Like if you put it aside for 2 days, put it aside for a week, set a reminder, come back in a week and see if you can do it the correct way. Then sometimes you do have to give yourself a couple of cycles of that, but spaced repetition is really valuable for reviewing questions. And also be sure to review all of your questions, because that is just more opportunities to learn and do things better. Congratulations on the perfect score. Thank you. Curious, how much time did it take you to go through your whole TTP study plan? So I was working full time. It took me about 9 or 10 months, but in hours, it took me about 500 hours. If you aren't working full time, or if you have like a different job type that's gives you more mental energy at the end of the day, then you might be able to do it more quickly. But yes, I went from, so when you do TTP, it will like ask you for your mock to start, and then it'll ask you for your target score. I didn't have a mock and I picked the highest target score, and I'm pretty sure what that does is it gives me like 100% of the lessons. Whereas if you had a higher mock or you had a lower target score, it might skip some of the more like niche lessons that are less likely to come up. So I did the full course, and it took me about 500 hours. And then the mocks on their own took, 3 or 4 hours each, plus some review. Is it better to cut losses on a question we don't seem to be getting right after 3 minutes? Will that give me more time on questions I might get right later? Yeah, after 3, okay. So again, there's 2 tiers. Is it better to cut losses on a question you don't seem to be getting right after 3 minutes? On the exam, yeah, I would probably cut them before then. On prep, I would take as long as it takes. Like if you're learning new topics, and 3 minutes is not that long, because as I said earlier, what you want to do is develop the skill of drilling down between the last 2 answer choices and seeing why one is better than the other. And so that's what you don't want to rush when you're practicing untimed, because that is where you're going to get the hard questions correct and be able to get like a higher score. And so if you are early on, Krishan, and it's taking you 3 minutes, I honestly would not rush through those. I would just keep practicing until you are able to at least get an answer you feel good about, and then you will get more quick. If you were taking the exam though, I would definitely cut your losses and bookmark it to review before 3 minutes, because that is really going to cut into your time with other questions. Sure, thanks for the advice. Like if I'm solving 600 to 650 questions on GMAT Club, I'm able to solve 7 out of 10 questions correctly, but spending that 5 to 6 minutes. Yeah, I mean, if it takes you 7 or 5 to 6 minutes on the 6 to 650, but you are spending that and you're doing okay, like your accuracy would be about 70%, though a small sample size, then I think that's not bad, drill on those questions, maybe try to get your accuracy a little bit higher. And then when it's more like 8 or 9, I would just go up to the next tier of question and see if you can get a decent accuracy on those as well, because accuracy is where the points are made, not timing. And timing is a strategy, but it is just so much further down the list as far as on your journey. So focus on your accuracy, prioritize your accuracy early on, and don't worry so much about timing, because a lot of the timing issues as you get more accurate will kind of resolve themselves. But I have 20 days and what all to focus on to improve my RC, my GMAT in 20 days. 20 days, that's actually a decent amount of time. The first thing I will tell you is if your test is in 20 days, then take a few days off before the test, and it's fine to do some practice questions, but don't be studying 4 hours a day, just like burning yourself out right before your exam, because you're better off going in well rested than anything you're going to learn in that last week or so. Just going in relaxed can be the difference between like plus or minus 40 points, maybe more. Until then, I would really focus on how much you're getting out of your first read of the passage. Are you able to identify a simple story? Like, how good is it? The more simple it is, the more you could say you read a passage and then you're explaining it to someone that didn't read it, like a young cousin. The more simple it is, the more you can explain it to someone in one sentence in a way that they will still know what you read about, even though they have not seen the passage, the better I think that reflects your understanding. So work on your first read through, see how good you can get your simple story, and see how much of the structure you're able to notice. See how much of the markers, like contrast markers, are they sharing different opinions? Are they sharing the same opinions? Is the author presenting opinions that they agree or disagree with? Are they offering a problem and a solution? Is their solution good? That sort of thing. The more you can get out of your first read, then the better you're setting yourself up time-wise. And so practice some reading, practice really breaking things down, write down everything. And if you were consistently like doing well, identifying conclusions, doing well on the structure, able to accurately find information in the passage, or able to track the logical flow, then you are in a good position. But definitely that last few days before the test, just take some time to take care of yourself and get some sun and get plenty of sleep, and that will set you up for better success than studying until the last possible minute. Okay. Thank you all so much. I hope you have a great day.